All right, so are you ready to dive into some seriously big questions? Because today, we're going to be tackling the meaning of life.
Ooh, that's a big one.
It is, it is. We've got some super interesting lectures from a philosophy course all about figuring out, well, what it means to be human.
You know what I find fascinating about these lectures? It's like they don't just throw a bunch of abstract theories at us, they actually take us on this journey.
Yeah, I like that, a journey through history.
Right, through all these different ways philosophers have tried to answer this age-old
I
question.
love a good journey.
Yeah,
So let's start way, way back with this thing called the axial model.
axial model.
Now, I know it sounds kind of sci-fi,
It does.
but it's actually this super important period in history, like where this whole idea emerged that human life is all about transformation.
Transformation, huh?
Yeah. Like we're not just here to exist, we're here to evolve, to uncover some deeper meaning. It's like going from appearance to reality, from bondage to liberation, all that good stuff.
It's like saying, hey, there's more to life than meets the eye.
Exactly. There's this deeper reality out there just waiting to be discovered.
If you're willing to, put in the work.
Yeah, embark on the quest, right?
The quest.
It makes you wonder, if that urge we all have to kind of level up in life, if that's like somehow connected to this whole axial model thing.
Oh, interesting. Like it's ingrained in us from way back then.
Maybe, maybe. But then, fast forward a bunch of centuries and boom, the 18th century Enlightenment hits the scene.
The Enlightenment, big changes.
Big changes. Suddenly, it's all about reason and logic.
It's like, put on your thinking caps, everyone.
Exactly. It's all about using our brains to solve problems, to figure out the world.
And, it makes sense, right? Progress.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
But did this shift toward reason? Like, did it push those big questions about the meaning of life to the side? Did it make them less important?
Well, that's where our friend Immanuel Kant comes in. Yeah, he was this brilliant philosopher, and he tried to kind of bring together the wisdom of the axial model with this new modern scientific worldview.
So Kant was like, hold on, reason is great, but it's not the whole story.
Yeah, he was basically like, look, reason is awesome for understanding the physical world, the stuff we can see and touch.
Right, right.
But when it comes to ultimate realities, he said, does God exist? What about the soul? What's the meaning of the universe?
The big questions.
The big questions. He said, reason can't really give us definite answers to those things.
So wait, Kant is saying we're driven to ask these big questions, even though we might never be able to answer them with reason alone.
Exactly. He recognized that humans have this innate metaphysical disposition.
Metaphysical disposition.
Yeah.
Sounds fancy.
It's just a fancy way of saying that. We have this deep urge to grapple with these unanswerable questions, to seek meaning beyond just the physical world.
And he thought that's what makes us human.
He did. He thought that this searching, this questioning, it's part of what makes us unique.
That's a pretty wild idea, isn't it? Like, our questions are just as important as the answers.
Maybe even more so.
So, where do we go from there? If reason has its limits, how do we even approach these questions?
Well, Kant believed we actually have two ways of knowing, our senses and our reason.
Right, what we experience and how we think about it.
But he said both of those have limitations.
So we're stuck.
Well, not exactly. This idea actually led to a split within philosophy itself. On one hand, you have those who focus on analyzing concepts, using logic and reason.
Okay, that makes sense.
And then you have those who are more interested in reflecting on those big meaning of life questions, the things that go beyond what reason alone can grasp.
So even philosophers are acknowledging there's something more out there, something beyond pure logic.
It seems that way. We're left with this tension, right? Knowing there's more to life than just what science can explain, but not quite sure how to get at it.
It's like we're standing on the edge of this huge uncharted territory, and we're just itching to explore, but we don't have a map.
I love that analogy. And that brings us perfectly to the Romantics.
Ah, the Romantics.
Now, these guys weren't satisfied with just reason as their guide.
They were all about feeling, right?
Exactly. They felt like Kant's emphasis on logic, it was too restrictive, too cold and impersonal.
They were all about passion and imagination.
They thought true understanding came from embracing the whole human experience. The emotions, the intuitions, the things that go beyond just the rational mind.
So less about following a logical roadmap and more about trusting your gut.
If they were all about feeling their way through the world, yeah.
And didn't they have this fascination with the outsider figure?
Oh, absolutely. The Romantics loved the idea of the misunderstood individual, the person who sees the world differently and challenges the status quo.
The rebels, the artists, the poets.
Exactly. They celebrated those who dared to be different, who felt deeply and saw things others might miss.
Okay, so we've got Kant, the brilliant logician, the romantics, champions of feeling and intuition. And then we have Hegel.
Hegel. Now this is where things get really interesting.
He takes us in a whole other direction. Right?
He did. Hegel introduces this wild idea that history is actually the unfolding of spirit.
Spirit, what's that all about?
It's like this dynamic energy, a force that's pushing humanity toward greater freedom and self-awareness.
Okay, I'm intrigued, but I need a little more explanation.
Okay, so imagine history as this grand narrative, this story with a purpose.
Like a giant play unfolding across time.
Exactly. Hegel believed that everything that's happened, it's not just random.
There's a direction, a meaning behind it all.
He thought so. He saw history as this constant striving towards something greater, a journey that we're all part of, even if we don't realize it.
And this spirit, it's the driving force behind it all.
It is. It's more than just thinking, you know? It's a blend of reason and passion, this powerful energy that's shaping the world.
So it's not just about individual journeys anymore. It's about this collective human story.
Right. We're all playing a part in this grand scheme of things, contributing to the progress of this spirit, even if our actions seem small and insignificant in the moment.
Wow, that's a pretty big idea to wrap my head around. But if history is this unfolding of spirit, if there's this predetermined path, does that mean we don't really have free will? Are we all just puppets on a string? That's a question that's, stumped a lot of folks.
It has. It has.
Hegel believed, that we do have freedom, but it's not this like absolute freedom.
No.
It's freedom within the context of history,
Right.
We're influenced by the time and the place we live in.
It's like we're all on this river, right?
Okay, I like that.
You can steer our boats, but the current, the riverbanks, they're always going to influence where we end up.
That's a great analogy.
Yeah.
But how does that actually work?
Yeah.
In real life,
Yeah.
How much agency do we really have?
Right, if we're all products of our time.
And where does our own personal journey for meaning, fit into this whole grand scheme of history?
Well, here's where things get even more interesting.
Okay, lay it on me.
Hegel argued that individuals, we actually need the state, a stable state, to achieve true freedom.
Wait, the state? You mean like the government?
Yeah. He's talking about laws, institutions, a shared culture, all those things.
So it's not about freedom from society, it's freedom within society.
He thought so. He believed that the state, it provides a framework for individuals to thrive,
But doesn't that kind of contradict the whole idea of individual freedom?
It's definitely a tricky concept.
It is. What about our rights and liberties?
Right. These are important.
Doesn't this, prioritizing the state, doesn't it open the door to some potentially bad outcomes?
Well, that's where Hegel gets a little controversial, I guess you could say.
I could see that.
Some folks, they accuse him of being authoritarian, of valuing conformity over individuality.
Yeah, that makes sense.
But to be fair to Hegel,
Right.
he wasn't talking about blind obedience to some oppressive government.
He was talking about a state that fosters individual freedom, right?
Within a framework, yeah. A framework of shared values and goals.
Okay, so it's all about finding the right balance.
Balance. Always about balance.
But even if we buy that, history, it's not always this neat and tidy progression, right?
No, it's messy.
It is. It's full of setbacks, unexpected turns, conflicts.
Hegel had a term for that, actually.
He did.
Übergang.
Übergang.
Yeah, it's a German word that describes those difficult, sometimes painful transitions that are necessary for growth.
Like growing pains, but for society.
Exactly. He saw those periods of turmoil, of upheaval, as essential.
Like a reset button, maybe?
Reset button, yeah.
But how do we know these transitions, are actually leading to something better? What if it's just a cycle of the same problems over and over again?
Well, that's where Hegel's optimism comes in.
He was a pretty optimistic guy, huh?
He was. He believed that even in the face of terrible events, there's this underlying rationality to history.
Like there's a reason for it all.
Yeah. He thought that the human spirit, it's always striving for greater freedom, greater self-awareness.
And that this striving, it'll eventually lead to a better world.
He believed so. It's like the path might be winding, even treacherous, but the direction is ultimately positive.
Okay, that's a nice thought.
It is.
But I'm still wrestling with this tension between, individual freedom and the role of the state.
It's a tough one.
It is. And on top of that, we haven't even really talked about, like, what the self is in all of this.
Oh, that's a good point. We haven't tackled the self yet.
Right. It's easy to think of ourselves as like these separate individuals.
Like those billiard balls you mentioned earlier bouncing around.
Exactly. But Hegel, he challenges that notion.
He does. He said our sense of self, it's actually shaped by our relationships with others, by the institutions we're part of, even by the historical context we live in.
So we're not just born with like a fixed sense of who we are.
He didn't think so. He saw the self as this dynamic process, always evolving and changing in response to the world around us.
So our identities are formed through this interplay between our inner selves and the outside world.
Hegel would say yes. It's a journey of becoming, a process of continually figuring out who we are in relation to others and to the larger forces of history.
That's pretty profound when you think about it.
It is.
But it also makes me wonder, if I'm always changing, if who I am is always in flux, is there even like a core me?
That's the age-old question, right?
Is there something that stays the same throughout all these transformations?
Hegel believed there was a core self, but it's not static.
Gotcha.
He saw it as this dynamic center of consciousness, always evolving through our experiences and interactions with the world.
So it's not like there's this little me hiding inside, just waiting to be discovered.
Nope. It's more like the me is always in the making.
Always under construction.
Exactly. And that construction process, it's influenced by all those social and historical forces we've been talking about.
You're not just isolated individuals. We're part of something much bigger.
Participants in a grand story.
That's a beautiful way to think about it.
Yeah.
So we've got Hegel painting this optimistic picture of history, this journey toward greater freedom and self-awareness.
He was a big believer in progress.
He was. But, not everyone sees the world through those rose-colored glasses.
That's true.
There's got to be another side to this story. Right?
There is, and that's where Arthur Schopenhauer comes in.
Ah, Schopenhauer.
He offers a much darker perspective.
Yeah, he's the guy who basically said life is suffering, isn't he?
Well, that's putting it a bit simply.
Okay.
But yeah, Schopenhauer was a pessimist through and through.
He wasn't exactly known for his cheery outlook, that's for sure.
He wasn't. He believed that reality is driven by this blind, insatiable force he called the will.
The will.
Yeah, and it's not like willpower, the kind you use to resist that extra slice of cake.
Okay, so it's something deeper than that.
Much deeper. He saw the will as this fundamental force that operates in all living things, this constant striving that ultimately leads to suffering.
So we're all slaves to this will.
In a way, yeah. He believed it keeps us trapped in this cycle of desire and dissatisfaction.
Always wanting more, never really finding true fulfillment.
Exactly. Leading to a life filled with pain, frustration, and ultimately a sense of meaninglessness.
Okay, yeah, I see why he wasn't the life of the party.
Not exactly party material.
But if he's right, if life really is this endless cycle of suffering, is there any way out? Is there any hope for finding meaning?
That's the big question, isn't it? Schopenhauer didn't think so, at least not in the way we usually think about it.
So no easy answers.
Not from Schopenhauer. He believed that knowledge, like just understanding things, it wasn't enough to overcome the suffering.
Oh, so reason can't save us.
He didn't think so. He thought traditional philosophy, with its emphasis on reason, it was kind of powerless against this fundamental problem of human existence.
So what's the solution then? Did he have any ideas?
He did, but they're a bit unconventional.
Unconventional, how so?
He proposed 4 main ways to escape the clutches of this will.
Okay, I'm listening.
One is aesthetic contemplation.
Aesthetic contemplation, that sounds kind of highbrow.
It's basically about appreciating beauty, like getting lost in art or music or even nature.
Right, finding moments of awe and wonder.
Exactly. Schopenhauer thought those experiences could kind of lift us out of the everyday world, give us a break from the will's demands.
Okay, I can see how that might help.
Another way is through compassion.
Compassion.
Yeah, recognizing the suffering of others.
Oh, I see.
He thought that could help us transcend our own selfish desires and connect with something bigger than ourselves.
Well, it's about realizing we're all in this together.
Exactly. We're all struggling, all part of this shared experience of being human.
Okay, that one resonates.
The third way is asceticism.
Asceticism. Isn't that all about, denying yourself pleasure?
It is. Living a life of simplicity, self-discipline, very few material possessions.
Yeah, not exactly my style, but I get the logic.
Right. If the will is the source of suffering and the will is all about wanting things, then maybe the answer is to stop wanting so much.
Makes sense, in a way.
And the fourth and most radical way is the denial of the will altogether.
The denial of the will, what does that even mean?
It's essentially a complete rejection of the will's driving force, a total extinguishing of desire.
Wow, that sounds pretty intense.
It is. Schopenhauer believed that this was the ultimate path to liberation.
Liberation from suffering, I guess.
Exactly, but it's a difficult path, a path of renunciation and self-denial.
So Schopenhauer gives us these 4 options, but none of them sound particularly easy or, fun.
He doesn't sugarcoat things, that's for sure.
It's like he's saying, life is tough, but here are some ways to maybe make it a little less tough.
Well, he wouldn't disagree with that assessment, but, his philosophy does make us think about desire and how much of our suffering is caused by our own wanting.
It challenges that whole always strive for more mentality.
It does. It makes us question whether that endless pursuit of happiness is really the answer.
So if we're not supposed to strive, what are we supposed to do? Just sit around contemplating beauty and denying ourselves any pleasure.
That's the challenge Schopenhauer throws at us. He doesn't give us a step-by-step guide to a happy life.
More like a wake-up call, maybe.
Maybe. He forces us to confront this fundamental question. How do we live a meaningful life in a world that's inherently full of suffering?
That's a question we've been grappling with this whole deep dive, haven't we?
We have. We've gone from Kant's emphasis on reason and morality
To the romantic celebration of emotion and intuition.
to Hegel's grand vision of historical progress.
And now we end with Schopenhauer's call to transcend the will.
It's been quite a journey.
It has. And, maybe, just maybe, the journey itself is part of the answer.
What do you mean?
Well, it's not necessarily about arriving at some final destination, or having all the answers figured out.
It's about the process.
Yeah. The questioning, the exploring, the wrestling with these big ideas, that's what gives our lives meaning.
So it's about embracing the uncertainty, the not knowing.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And maybe, just maybe, along the way, we'll each find our own unique answer to the question of what it all means.
I like that, embracing the journey.
And who knows, maybe Schopenhauer, despite his pessimism, would even agree with us on that.
Maybe he would. Well, thanks for joining me on this deep dive.
Thanks for having me. It's been a mind-expanding experience.